Hey guys, welcome to the High Level Podcast. Thank you again for joining this week. My name's Jonathan, your host, joined as always by my beautiful co-host, Mr. Damon Hunselaar. How are you, kind sir?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you
Okay,
doing?
man. It's been a tough one. Me and electricity. We'll get into it later, but me and electricity are just not good friends at all. Anyway, we are joined this week by a magical guest, Mr. Matthew Kapp. How are you doing there on sunny Cape Town side, Matt?
I'm really great and happy to be here. Thanks for
Okay,
being
man.
here.
Is it actually sunny there? I don't know. I'm just saying words.
It was sunny today when the sun
Okay.
was up.
Okay,
It was
fair
sunny.
enough.
Yeah.
But you guys, the sun goes down at like 8 o'clock, doesn't it? 9 o'clock.
In summer,
Maybe in summer, but in
But
winter it also goes down earlier.
okay, fair enough.
So the sun's busy going down now. Yeah.
Look at you, eh? Yes, see, we've been down for like an hour now. Gee, whiskers.
Okay.
Anyway, guys, so Matthew Kapp, he's a hydrogen systems engineer and consultant. He cut his teeth at the University of Stellenbosch, graduating cum laude with his master's degree in mechanical engineering, where he modeled fuel cell propulsion systems for multicopters. Say that 3 times fast. And yes, I am the most uneducated of this group, so hopefully I will be quiet most of the time. He's passionate about hydrogen as the fuel of the future, and he's worked for leading hydrogen-based companies such as Verne in San Francisco and Cryomotive in Munich, as well as consulted for startups curious about using fuel cells. He's also obtained certifications including financial management from UNISA, project management from UCT, and aerospace engineering for drones at UP. He has co-authored an international journal article in Cryogenics, which compares the effects of refueling, driving, and parking for different hydrogen storage technologies. He currently has 2 international patents pending, which aid in reducing the complexity of cryo-compressed hydrogen storage systems, whilst also improving their performance. These days, he's currently on a career break, upskilling his software development abilities while consulting for startups and research groups involved in hydrogen propulsion. So, there's your resume, Maddie. Quick 1-minute resume. Did I get most of that right?
Yeah, no, perfect.
Seems about
Sounds
right.
better than it sounds
Just
in my head. So no, it sounds great.
just a little humble brag there.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So obviously, Matt's sort of speciality is around heavy duty vehicle hydrogen applications. Am I right, Matt?
Yeah, that's perfect.
That's
Yeah.
pretty much his speciality. So we're going to be talking a bit through that this week. What is it? How do we get around it? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities in the world of hydrogen? So yeah, I've got a few talking points here for you boys. And we can chat a bit further on this, but basically got this number. Tell me if you guys think this is directionally right. Transportation in the US now, we're talking United States here, accounts for approximately 28% of greenhouse gas emissions in the US, and that was in 2022. Does that sound about right? So, sounds about right.
sounds right to me.
Oh, yes, sounds good. Yeah.
So I think the important thing to take note of there is transportation is not just, in that case, like not just passenger vehicles or not just trucks. It's all of them combined together. And we'll throw it up for anyone who's on YouTube there. There's a nice little pie chart. But the biggest emitters are light duty vehicles. So that's passenger vehicles, everyday cars, people using those things. And then we got second in line, heavy duty vehicles, medium and heavy duty vehicles, taking up a lot of that. And that's estimated to be, what did we have it there at? 23% of that 28%. So I think we need to make that differentiation, right? Have I got that right?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Right, so about
Yes,
a
I was thinking
quarter
about it.
in that 28%, if transport is 28% of all greenhouse gas emissions, then of that 28%, about a quarter of that is just the heavy duty mix. So that's trucks getting your groceries to you and Amazon fulfillment and all of that type of stuff.
Yeah, that
Yep.
works out to trucks being about 6.4% of total emissions, if you want to
Okay.
factor that in.
If we want to factor that in. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think looking across to the EU as well, the numbers line up pretty much the same. They got about 25% versus the 28% in the US. and about 6% of total EU gases is from road transport, heavy duty freight, medium duty freight. And I think this all ties back into what are the places we can look at getting the biggest bang for our buck, right? And I think, Matt, you said this last night when we had our call. Not a lot has really been done in terms of heavy duty transport. And I don't know if you want to talk about this further. Like, we're doing a lot to sort of greenerize electricity production and stuff like that. But do you see like low hanging fruit in the transport sector?
Yeah. So most people, when they talk about decarbonation of I guess transport, they think passenger vehicles, because obviously Tesla and the whole brand around that has made that very popular and very famous. And then I guess there's an assumption that you can kind of just scale up the idea applied to cars for trucks or airplanes, etc. And that would be an inaccurate assumption, because it's completely different. First of all, you're dealing with businesses and not individuals. And then yeah, it's bigger, heavier, more power, etc. And yeah, for some other reason, there has been a lot of focus on decarbonizing cars, but not that much, at least commercially, on trucks. And aeroplanes is kind of just starting. So it's a bit, people will shout out, no, it's been, fuel cells was invented in 1860. Cool. But in terms of commercial adoption, that's a different question, and that's slowly, it's a bit behind electric vehicles in terms of passenger cars, I would say. Yeah.
Why do you think that is, Matt? Like, it seems like an easier thing, or is the technology just not there yet for
Yeah,
heavy duty?
that's a very good question. So there has technology developments in terms of going heavier. Um, Look, I think the honest answer is that kind of Tesla took the world by storm and
Mm,
brought electric vehicles to the market far quicker than a lot of companies were planning. And then kind of a lot of the big automotive companies played catch up.
mm.
And then based on that, yeah, it's a good question. I don't know much about the business or reasons, but based on that, businesses are, I think, yeah, I'm talking a lot as I'm thinking, but I think the big thing is that it's easier for an individual, such as a celebrity back in the day, to show that they're saving the planet, whereas a business is multiple stakeholders and shareholders that you could need to convince it makes financial sense. And yeah, so lithium batteries and solar, etc., has decreased in prices over time, and recently it's starting to make financial sense. So I understand that electric vehicles have not made so much financial sense up until recently.
Okay,
Yeah.
makes sense. And then, so in terms of electrifying heavy duty applications, is the biggest hurdle that weight that you're adding extra lithium batteries to the drivetrain, or what's the biggest hurdle for businesses?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And there's multiple aspects to it, but I think the question is more how do you solve it? Um, so so there's different decarbonization means, and what most people think of when they think of electric vehicles is lithium batteries. So what I've learned especially in the truck industry, the margins are very thin. So especially if you are one of these logistics companies, in South Africa, you kind of drive past them all the time. And so is logistic company. The margins there are very thin, and they kind of fluctuate throughout the year, sometimes negative, sometimes positive. So if you take that and now, so with electric vehicles in the EU, I believe, and the US, you're allowed 2 tons extra mass. There's a certain mass the truck can be, so you're allowed two
Oh,
tons
sure.
extra because electric vehicles are worse. But even with that, you basically have your batteries are so heavy to try and meet the range that you want, that you can put less stuff on the vehicle. So you're actually moving stuff around as a loss. So you would see the uptake so far as being like Pepsi, Coca-Cola, where they can kind of subsidize the money they're losing on
Mm.
the electric trucks, because they have markups elsewhere in the business. But if it's a purely logistics company, you're basically losing money by going battery electric, because yeah, it's just you need to have such a heavy battery that you end up um yeah, having less space for the stuff that you want to put on the truck.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're constrained by the weight, you got to give up somewhere, and it's obviously going to be product you're putting on the vehicle now. Makes a lot of
Yes,
sense.
exactly. And there's a legal limit in terms of how much mass you're allowed to have on the road. That's why there's these weight bridges along the N1, etc. So if there's a legal limit on the mass, your battery's taking up more mass. The law accounts for it, but it's still not winning yet. And the margins are so thin. You were making 3%, now you're making -1 or 2%. That's kind of ballpark what I've learned in the trucking industry.
You were piping in there, Mr. Unsela?
Yeah, I was gonna say, obviously with that added weight, it's a permanent weight as well. So obviously, if you had to compare like a diesel powered truck versus an electric powered truck, the the energy you need just to move around is more
Yeah,
with the electric
100%.
vehicle, with a battery powered truck.
I think it's such a
So
hard sell as well to like your customer now to say, listen, we've invested in these heavier electric trucks. We can take less product now, so we're going to charge you more versus the other guy who's got a diesel truck and will be cheaper. Like the customer at the end doesn't really care too much.
Look, at the end, it's a very good point. At the end of the day, no one's decarbonizing for the fun of it.
Yeah.
So I guess they look at some point governments they signed the Paris Accord and start making regulation around that to enforce kind of carbonization. So I think there are some points there about the EU goals. The US goals seem to change now and again, but the EU goals. And they're sort of becoming law, such as by 2040, all 50% of all new vehicles need to be zero emissions, or you can maybe talk a bit more into that. And then you see companies following, such as MAN, Volvo, Daimler, etc., that are kind of setting the same targets. And we might say, yeah, targets is kind of just people saying things, but I can tell you that they are definitely working on it and signing resources and engineering teams to developing these green vehicles. So yeah, basically it starts with the laws, and then the truck companies follow, and then yeah, I guess I didn't want to put it up, but then eventually it starts getting to the question of hydrogen. Why hydrogen? So Elon Musk has called hydrogen a fool a fool
Yeah, I
star.
actually wanted to ask about that. Like, do you agree with that
Um,
or
yeah, so yeah, I mean, I get paid a salary for hydrogen products. So
can't really
I'm,
talk
I'm,
shit
fairly-
about it?
I'm fairly biased, but no, I can be quite open. Look, the big thing is, and I wasn't sure where to get into it, is that let's start with a petrol car. I mean, if you have a tiny engine and a massive petrol tank, your weight is almost negligible besides the fuel. So you have this basically piece of plastic wrapped around the petrol, and that weighs very little. Whereas a battery, if you need more power and you need more energy, you need to add more cells, which weighs, and I think that's what Damon was alluding to. And then analogous to the petrol vehicle, where you have an engine and you have a fuel system which are separate, compared to the battery where it's all in one. The power and energy you need both comes from the battery. Analogous to that, the hydrogen sort of idea is that you have a tank that carries hydrogen, and then you have the fuel cell or the engine. Yeah, I don't want to go, but basically you have something that converts hydrogen into moving the vehicle forward. Those two things are independent, and as you go bigger to trucks and aeroplanes, and as you have a bigger payload of a few tons that you have available for your propulsion system, you end up that you have that kind of, if you were to draw a line in terms of mass versus energy available, it's a straight line with battery, and then it's kind of exponential curve with hydrogen. So once you start looking at trucks, kind of hydrogen is, I would say, the only answer. There's two, yeah. So there's gas, yeah. Hydrogen is kind of the only answer if you want to equal hydrogen, because I mean equal diesel. Because as I said, the truck industry, kind of the margins are set around the diesel industry, and even though there's laws in that, it's very difficult to kind of replace that with a zero emission solution if it's going to cause them to lose money. So yeah, that's where incentives and government kind of, they can't just make laws, they also need to put funding to kind of encourage companies to do that. But that's a different story. So basically with heavy duty applications, it makes sense in terms of that you can drive further and you take up less mass if you use hydrogen as opposed to batteries. Whereas with vehicles, it's very close. So yeah, I often did this. You would draw you'd have a straight line for battery energy versus mass, and then this exponential curve, and they kind of meet somewhere. And passenger cars is kind of in that range with the limited space and mass you have available. Hydrogen, it seems to be way too complex compared to batteries, and you don't get that much more. But once you start scaling up to heavier systems, it makes a lot of sense to use hydrogen because you can fit more energy per mass. Yeah, that was a very rounded, long way, which I could have probably said shorter.
No, no, man, it makes sense. So if I hear you right, because as you get larger, so say you're moving heavy duty trucks, big trucks,
Yeah, both in
maybe
terms of
even
space and mass.
exactly right, cargo ships, aeroplanes,
Yes.
things like that, where you're not necessarily constrained too much by a tank itself. Like in a passenger's car, people need to occupy the car. You can't have a big
Yes.
tank in there, obviously. So
Yes, you
if
have
you
more
have
space behind the cabin, on the sides, you have more
exactly,
space available.
if you
So,
have a bit more budget for that sort of
yeah.
room, there's a point on the graph where it starts to make more sense for hydrogen than it would for
Yes.
a battery car.
Yes, so that's a very good point, and there's actually two sides of the equation. So again, I don't want to, push hydrogen or anything, but there are a lot of, CEOs and people, way above my pay grade that seem to be
No, no,
thinking
no. Fair enough.
the same idea. But there's two sides to the equation. So first of all, okay, the priority is decarbonization, and in engineering, you generally pick the best solution for a specific application. And it seems, yeah, more or less rule of thumb for passenger cars, batteries makes a lot of sense, but then for heavier duty, hydrogen makes sense. But there's two parts to it. There's the range of the vehicle itself, but then there's also the infrastructure around it. How do you kind of recharge these vehicles? And if you're talking about the hub and spoke model, so what does that mean? Basically, you have a central distribution where basically the company wants to charge, say, 100 trucks. How do you do that? So as an example, Pepsi that bought the Tesla semi truck. Besides the disadvantages of losing money in terms of the distribution, they needed to build something like a ESCOM substation on their factory in order to charge the truck. So if you were to go work out, how much energy is on a truck, okay, you can't sit around all day. You need to charge it in an hour or less. Okay, you need to do that times 100. We're talking about a few megawatts that now need to be charged at a time in terms of power. And this is a bit of a bottleneck. So then, okay, does it make sense to rather push a gas through instead of electrons? Um, yeah, both have challenges, but if you don't need to build a substation, that might be a big positive.
Anything to add, Mr. Insular? You've been very quiet.
Yeah, no, I've just been listening to the wonderful conversation. Yeah, I know one thing with hydrogen, especially if you're transporting it as a liquid. Obviously, it comes with its own complexities because you have to basically get it really cold, and that comes with its own set of issues as well. But I know in that sense, it's as fast to fill as petrol. You can correct me if I've got the
Yeah,
logic
that's
wrong here.
that's actually an excellent question, and I mean that's kind of the yeah, that's the very technical aspect of that is what I've been working most of my life on. And yeah, I don't want to go too deep into that. So let me try and I guess provide an overview. So again, if I were to go back to this chart idea in terms of if you have more mass, it's a straight line in terms of energy with a battery. It's an exponential curve for, let's say, gaseous hydrogen, and then you have a higher exponential curve in terms of liquid hydrogen. Um, and actually, liquid hydrogen is used a lot, even when the vehicle is gaseous. You might be like, "What?" Okay, let me try and explain
Yes,
this. So,
yeah, yeah.
so,
Please.
in terms of what are the different constraints? There's constraints in terms of making the hydrogen somewhere. There's constraints in terms of transporting the hydrogen. There's constraints in terms of physical land, because land always costs money. It doesn't care whether you have a shopping center or hydrogen on top of it. Land costs money. And there's also sort of regulations. You don't want to have too big a sort of hydrogen system on land, because then it goes into the next law phase kind of thing. Similar to if you have a power station in your house versus on a factory versus this 100 megawatt power station. There's kind of different laws. And what seems to happen a lot is that they actually prefer to have liquid hydrogen on the refueling station side. So let's again imagine someone like Pepsi that has 100 trucks they need to refill. They prefer to have liquid hydrogen on the site because that allows you to have less space that is now taken up on the land. And then there's basically a fancy system that converts that liquid hydrogen then into high pressure gas on the vehicle. So we actually see a lot of logistics is currently around liquid hydrogen. And as you say, there are a lot of challenges, but fortunately that has been solved to a certain extent because let's just take as an example Linde or Eloquid, the guys that make our LNG, they also make the hydrogen, and for them it kind of works out cheaper, especially at scale, to transport liquid hydrogen around than to try and transport gaseous hydrogen around. And you're right, there's technical challenges. So hydrogen is a tiniest molecule and it will escape it will leak. It's almost impossible to prevent that. And liquid makes one challenge and high pressure makes another challenge. But if you have liquid at low pressure, it sort of seems manageable. And unfortunately, yeah, we've had the industrial use of transporting liquid hydrogen around, but then also there's been the space industry that has been using liquid hydrogen. So it's different challenges now. We need a truck to last for 10 years and not just one flight. But a lot of like the valve companies I know, they do have existing experience with managing liquid hydrogen. So fortunately, there is some sort of existing framework for liquid hydrogen, but the challenge, it was used for either one flight or for industrial moving on the land. And now the industry is starting to learn, okay, how do we package that now into a vehicle or aeroplane? And that's sort of more in the nascent stages. Does that sort of answer your question, Damon?
Yeah,
More than.
I suppose my logic, and obviously I have an uneducated guess on this, is that in terms of transporting, obviously liquid is easier to transport than gas. And as you say,
Well, let's say cheaper. So let's say assuming which is true that a company such as Linde, BP with big pockets have been investing into that, and now per kilogram that you're transporting, it's cheaper over a certain range with liquid than with gas. That's my understanding. Might need to be corrected.
Just in terms of just for the benefit of our listeners, cryo hydrogen, what is it? What's the process and what's the challenges around that type of tech?
Yeah. So if someone were to go look me up on LinkedIn, there would be this massive word, which I mean, I actually kind of embarrassed myself in the first interview. I didn't know what it is, so I don't blame anyone else that hasn't been in the
Oh
in the
goodness, I
industry.
have to
So
go
there's
look now.
yeah, so specifically I've worked on something called cryo-compressed hydrogen, and like what the hell? But then the thing is, so Damon mentioned the word liquid. I think that's fine. So so cryogenic hydrogen basically means liquid. Gaseous hydrogen generally means high pressure gas, and then cryocompressed is a combination thereof where you're at high pressure and you're not a liquid because you can raise the technical thing of the critical point, but it goes very deep into the thermodynamics where you're trying to cool down hydrogen and then compress it to try and get it like really squashed into the vehicle. So that's the idea, but it is a very, very niche application. So it does seem that gaseous hydrogen and liquid hydrogen are the two main methods, and then cryocompress is kind of just a thermodynamic combination thereof. Yeah, I don't
No,
wish to
that's
go
good.
too deep.
What's the challenges? So I would assume like when you say liquid hydrogen, that's mainly what the trucking guys are looking at pursuing in the future. Is that correct? Or is that just like the cutting edge?
It's a brilliant question, and I don't know the answer. And I think I like to use the example of aeroplanes versus gaseous. So there's four companies involved in aeroplanes. Let me go there. Only one of them so far have done an actual liquid test. The other two have done a gas test, and the other one is still kind of in the design phase. But what is important there? So they're using gas in terms of getting the prototypes going. But yeah, whereas in trucks we're actually seeing normal gas used a lot more. And the conclusion I've come to is that it's far easier to refill a truck than an aeroplane. So
Fair enough.
So basically, you can kind of compensate the infrastructure. So gaseous hydrogen, let's say, is half the range compared to diesel, and then liquid will get you the full way equal to diesel, more or less. Or yeah,
Sorry, Maddie, when you say that, you say equal in terms of cost or in terms of range, or what is it equal?
Sorry, range.
Range.
Yeah,
Okay.
cost is another thing that I don't know too much about. So let's say theoretically liquid hydrogen will get you equal range to diesel, and then gaseous will get you, let's say, 60-70% of the range. And so liquid
Is that by mass or by volume, or because
in
you
terms
say
of yeah. No, that's a good question. So assuming you have equal mass budget across the difference, so you take a petrol vehicle and you kind of replace that now with the hydrogen system to not kind of negatively affect it. So it's a good point. The battery guy, often what happens is it's heavier but lower range. So a good way to standardize what they're trying to do with petrol vehicles, assume you replace existing, and then how much range do you get?
Okay.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say, what I was getting to is that gaseous hydrogen on the vehicle is sort of quite mature. It started with the vehicles, with the passenger cars, and then I think Hyundai, they've probably been doing it the last 10 years or so in terms of, I would say, medium duty trucks, so not heavy duty. Yeah, what does that mean? Basically, just a smaller, less powerful truck. And that has been quite established. And then there's something I could talk on later in terms of standardization, safety, etc. Whereas liquid hydrogen, as I said, they haven't quite figured out some of the challenges, how to actually physically do that on a vehicle and how to get it from the land onto the vehicle in a small space of time. Long story short, it's okay to use gaseous hydrogen with trucks because you can build more refilling stations. Whereas with the aeroplane, you need to get from point A to B. So basically, there's no point even considering gas. The end state needs to be liquid because you can't, they're not going to change the entire flight operations to land somewhere more. Yeah.
No,
that makes sense.
And then in terms of large like cargo ships and things like that, Matt, have they explored?
It's a good point. I don't know much about that.
Okay.
I think it's it's probably just. Let me take a step back. So they've had to develop basically a fuel cell now 1.2 megawatts for airplanes. So that is the most powerful vehicle fuel cell that I'm aware of. And I'm imagining ships would be, I don't know, let's say 10 megawatts or 100 megawatts. Someone will probably, give hate mail because I have no idea. But I think it's just another level in terms of heavy duty. That's kind of more for in the future.
Okay, fair enough. All right. So then in terms of, so you think trucks, heavy duty trucks up to that point, pretty happy with hydrogen gas as the propulsion method?
As an intermediate step. So there's two intermediate steps we're seeing. We're seeing in terms of gaseous hydrogen, 700 bar. Okay, that just means 700 times atmosphere, whereas your tire is maybe 2 times atmosphere. So it's really high pressure.
A little bit, yeah.
Just a little bit higher. And then the other intermediate step we're seeing is internal combustion engines instead of fuel cells. So what the hell am I talking about? So a fuel cell basically takes hydrogen and air and makes electricity. So you have a lot of overlap with electric vehicles. Whereas internal combustion engine is basically taking a diesel engine, and then instead of squirting diesel in, you squirt hydrogen in, kind of oversimplifying it. And then you might you might think, well, why not just do that? And there's been a lot of media from Toyota. It's like, yo, this is killing EVs. This is like the next big thing, the hydrogen internal combustion engine. The problem is it still creates something called NOx emissions, which means that it does nothing for climate change. But in terms of if you're standing next to the vehicle, you're still going to breathe in harmful emissions. So it kind of only solves half the problem. But from what I'm seeing is a lot of companies such as, a lot. There aren't that many to start off with, but Volvo and MAN, they're going along with two things: gaseous hydrogen and internal combustion engines to kind of get the ball moving, and then hopefully in future you can have a fuel cell instead of the engine and liquid instead of the gas. But in terms of it's very important to get actual customer commercial data. So they're using that more as an intermediary step, what I'm seeing. Whereas Daimler, they're kind of trying to to get the final picture immediately. So they're going with fuel cell liquid, and they're really pushing their version of liquid hydrogen. So yeah, those are the two different approaches I've seen. Unfortunately, everything is so what you call it, confidential, and behind the doors, you have no idea what is actually working and what is not. But it does seem that Daimler still has a few more steps before they have a commercial product. Hopefully I don't get letters from attorneys, but yeah, it does seem the gas piston, an internal combustion engine is more like ready today, whereas liquid and high power fuel cells is kind of more tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just have a quick question. So with the internal combustion hydrogen engines now, are they using just hydrogen as the pure source, or are they mixing it?
That's a brilliant question. Yeah.
And then so is it like a retrofit to convert the diesel engine into a hydrogen engine? Or is it just a replacement, basically?
So let's try and it's a combination of those things. So what I've seen is there's two different players in the game. There's retrofitters that will take existing diesel trucks and they will convert it for you to now be dual fuel, which is half diesel, half hydrogen. But then the manufacturers like MAN and Volvo, they have made their own internal combustion engine. Maybe it is as simple as a retrofit, but from their stance, it's a completely new engine that they've developed, which and that is now a hydrogen engine. And there's a technical nuance difference. So there's a technical difference whether you introduce hydrogen upstream of the engine or in the engine. And the two types, the one where you introduce hydrogen upstream is a bit simpler, but less efficient. And it can be quite big, about 50% less efficient. So there are retrofits, but again, they're not the end goal, because you want to have hydrogen in the engine, which is way more efficient, and that only MAN produces. So basically retrofit, yes, but not the most efficient, and completely new engine, yes, but still a lot of R&D to be done there for more efficient.
Because for me, what the attractive thing that sounds about using the combustion engine is that it's a gradual transition to hydrogen.
Yes.
Is that the idea behind using it in the first place? Because I don't know, but between using it as in combustion or as in a fuel cell, which is the most efficient way to get the energy out? Because I know both.
Yeah, good point. So fuel cells about 50% efficient. Internal combustion engine traditionally 30%. But as I say, this new way of putting it indirectly, they're getting more towards 40-50%. So current ICE, there's about a 50% difference, so 30% versus 50%. But future ICEs are getting closer. But then again, people often say efficiency and think efficiency, but at the end of the day, you need to achieve the initial requirements, and basically a 500 kilowatt fuel cell does not exist today, which is more or less what you need on a truck. Which raises a lot of other questions, but basically a fuel cell does not exist today that can cover the complete range of what a heavy duty Class 8 truck needs.
Okay. So I had another question, but now
I forgot.
Yeah.
I just want to say, for any lawyer that's listening to this, we are privileged to have you as a viewer, and leave our Matt alone. That's all I say. So Matt, I think for me, the biggest thing is, so what would you say is the biggest barrier? Let's talk heavy duty trucks now, just heavy duty trucks.
Sure.
What's the thing stopping like mass adoption from all these big logistics companies and things like that? Is it a cost? Is it purely cost? Is it infrastructure? Is it the government? Or is it all a combination?
I would say standardization. So it's a catch-22, chicken and egg, chicken and feed. I've heard a whole lot of different analogies.
Put them all in there, yeah.
For this, but I really like to use this analogy. So people don't realize it, but it's quite privileged. Whether I go with my Toyota or you go with your Volkswagen or what else, or Cherry or whatever, you go to a petrol station, and the petrol station can be BP or Shell or whatever. It kind of fits. And that's quite incredible, actually. So the petrol station, the refueling nozzle, and the receptacle, so the thing that catches the petrol on the vehicle, they fit. And we're not there yet with hydrogen. So as I said, we're looking at all these different hydrogen options. Are we gaseous, liquid, a hybrid thereof? And then if we do that, are there different companies competing within that space that are coming up with different ways? Because thermodynamically, hydrogen is complex, and in terms of refueling, it's a lot trickier than refilling with a pure liquid such as petrol. It's when I say complex, well, today in terms of petrol is easy and hydrogen we haven't figured out yet. So there's a lot of companies competing, and it's very difficult for a large company, whether it be a fleet company, to kind of pick, which is going to be the future of hydrogen, because they're still figuring out the ISO standard. So coming back to the analogy, some point a few decades ago, all these companies came together and said, look, we're all competing, but we need to have the same refueling kind of interface and the same method, in terms of refilling petrol. And they all agreed on that, and there was an international standard created on that. We're not there yet with hydrogen, and especially in terms of the future things such as liquid hydrogen, that's still a ways off. So the thing is, and they go together. So the ISO standard will not create a committee until there is commercial interest, and there's not commercial interest until there's
no standard. Yeah.
So it takes companies such as Daimler and Linde that I've seen that are really big companies, and they said, look, we're going to sponsor this ISO creation. So that means a lot of what we've developed, we're actually going to create open now that other companies can use. But by other companies using that will also push forward our commercial interests. So it requires, also Toyota has made a lot of their patents open. So it basically requires this whole software, open source, closed source. It requires closed source companies with commercial interests to make their work open source in the international standard working groups to kind of drive things along. That's what I've seen as the biggest bottleneck.
Gee whiz, eh? Then in terms of, so obviously if we're looking at hydrogen, a lot of it is we want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, obviously.
Yes.
And now obviously if we're using coal to produce the hydrogen, it's not helpful either, or methane or natural gas or whatever the story is. Is that obviously it's a problem, but do you see it getting better in the future, or is this going to be a thing?
100%. That's a good question.
Is it a cost thing?
There is hydrogen produced today. What is it? 70 million tons a year of hydrogen is being produced. Maybe that's that number. But it seems it's kind of all accounted for. It's all being used for, let's say, fertilizer production or whatever. So my understanding is basically that must not be touched and siphoned off to vehicle. In the same way, the existing grid should not be siphoned off for electric vehicles. That's a whole nother topic. So you need to have new energy production in order to create this green hydrogen in order to fill the vehicles. So I think just a good way to look at it, which doesn't often get said explicitly, is that you don't want to take any existing infrastructure. And by the way, the US just created a law 45V or something. I think it is at V45. That they made very stringent standards that you will get that you will get quite a heavy subsidy. You'll get a lot of money for producing hydrogen if it meets certain standards, and the big requirement is that it has to be new renewable generation. So it's no point. This gets very, very philosophical, but if we have renewable in South Africa that's working towards the grid, if go start using that for vehicles, you're actually increasing the coal share now for the normal. So it's kind of you're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. It's almost like a Ponzi scheme. So you definitely need to have new renewable generation to make green hydrogen for the new vehicles that don't yet exist.
And in terms of that, if we carry on with that, I don't know how good your view is on the EU or what your speciality is. Are they ready for that? Are they ready to go green hydrogen, or is that complex as well?
Well, they're creating the laws to do that, and this might sound weird. So we complain a lot about our elections, but 23% of Germany voted for the Green Party. So they kind of voted for a political party to kind of force them to go more green. So that sounds absolutely crazy to me and you. Like, why on earth would you do that? But people actually vote for people that want to police them to be more green. So in that political environment, which is very different to ours, let's first put food on the table, and have our lights on. Maybe that's first. But whereas in the EU, where it's kind
of that the whole reason Donald Trump, for lack of a better word, removed America from that
It's
Paris
it's a
Agreement?
very
Was
good
because he was
question.
saying we need to fix our economy before we can fix the environment.
Yeah, I
So
don't want to
was
go
that
too
kind of
much
like,
into politics, but
yeah.
a lot of EU countries, when we talk about high unemployment, you know, Germany, shucks, we went from 3% to 4% unemployment this year, whereas we're sitting at 40%. The US, they call themselves the greatest nation on earth, but they also have a high unemployment. They have a lot of issues. At the end of the day, you want this whole carbonization to make economic as well as green sense. But it's a catch-22. You first need economies of scale for that to happen. So I do not blame nations that have more than 5-10% unemployment that don't put carbonization as the #1 priority. And that brings another topic. Yeah, please do not force developing nations to make carbonization their #1 priority when they haven't fed everyone yet. Yeah, so I think it's very important for the EU to police their own people and not to try and force other nations to follow when they haven't had the privilege of the last 100 years of coal to meet the same development that they have.
I think
But
it's
yeah, that's more on a political.
no, I got,
Yeah,
it's
maybe
a
let's get back to the
no, but it's
hydrogen.
a difficult thing, right? Because energy it's so political. Like if you don't have energy in a country, the political powers that
Yeah,
be
so maybe
have no
let's to
power.
stick. You can probably cut out all of what I've said. Let's bring it more on the positive. So to put it on more of a positive side,
Yeah.
Germany, the company, seems to be very keen on having this green hydrogen, and there are political reasons because they realized with the war, with one of the wars, that they actually do not want to buy gas from a certain nation, or they do want on the one hand have what do you call it, sanctions while still needing the gas to kind of keep the heating on. So they do want to go to alternatives. And yeah, it seems like that's why countries such as Australia, Namibia are going big into green hydrogen because Germany apparently wants to buy all this hydrogen. So it is becoming political and national, but maybe on a positive note, that Germany actually seems to really want hydrogen. Are there more countries bidding to sell to this one current customer than is maybe maybe not anyway. Yeah, so it seems the EU kind of the voting and the politics is very pro-green, and the order, and also they want to cut ties with Russia, which is a big provider of theirs. And then it is creating financial opportunities for other countries such as Namibia that are sun. By the way, in the southern, it's by the way, people think it's often the equator that has the most sun, but it's actually more the southern tropics. So if you look at Chile, Namibia, northern South Africa, and Australia, that kind of has the most direct sunlight. And yeah, that's great opportunity to create hydrogen and theoretically sell that to Germany. I don't know how. But that's what
Yeah,
they're
well,
looking at.
I read
Yeah,
a very interesting report, and they were talking about like which are the nations that are most geared towards producing green hydrogen. So basically, they were saying that for it to be green, you obviously need renewable sources. So
Yes.
they were saying it's either solar or wind. Those are the biggest
Yeah.
contenders at the moment. And of the two, it's the solar that's got the most potential.
Yes.
And they were saying that it's really the southern hemisphere that has a lot
Yes.
of the things. So I think Namibia, South Africa,
Yes.
if we decide to really get involved, I think Brazil is also one, and
Yes.
Australia. But there's really not that many countries in the south that are looking to produce green hydrogen. That's mainly in Europe and in America, and
It's
where they've put a big emphasis on it. But like I find it very odd that the countries with the most potential are actually in the south.
It's a very good question. So if I were to, I did a subject in my master's on solar studies, and you would kind of see three areas that stand out. So the Southern Africa, maybe just north of South Africa, Australia, and Chile. And Chile uses the sun to produce lithium. So I don't know if people know that, but you kind of extract lithium as a liquid, and then you need a lot of sun to dry up the liquid to create these crystalline things that create the battery. So they kind of, and yeah, my brother and his wife, they went to Chile, and it's weird. You go into this this kind of nature reserve, which is meant to be this desert, and then you see all these workers kind of creating lithium. So where I'm going at, kind of southern Southern America, South America is kind of accounted for in terms of using their sun to create lithium. Australia is massive on hydrogen. They really have a big plan there. Why is it not happening in Southern Africa? Well, it seems it is now with Namibia. Why not other countries? I don't know. Maybe the transport shipping pipelines is still a bit of an open question. I don't know. I'm not too much an expert on the production side.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one because obviously we've seen a big push from our side in terms of a hydrogen consortium being made. There's lots of plans for Saldanha Bay to be like an export hub. And I mean, we've got the access. I think it's implementation. We got lots of funding. So I think it's just about getting talented people here to do the things, you know?
Yeah,
Is it?
it's a good question, and I don't know what the most bottlenecks are, but unfortunately we have a bit of an ethical dilemma in South Africa in terms of that we do not have sufficient energy for our own consumers. So
Exactly.
will the same lawmakers that govern the energy produced, will they allow exporting of energy?
I
It
think
might not be.
if the price is right, I mean, look at our history. We've always exported coal. We've always exported iron ore. We always export all our resources. So I
Yeah,
wouldn't
fair
put it
enough.
past. If hydrogen's the commodity that Europe's paying for, I'm sure they'll make a plan. But anyway,
Yeah,
I
it's a
think
good point. It just comes down to what's
at
so I
what
see a lot of
price?
talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it comes,
And who is it important to?
Yeah, there we
yeah,
go. I think, Manny, if
yeah.
you want to talk, maybe obviously we've spoken about heavy duty vehicles, applications, hydrogen, and you said one sentence, which is very true. It's a very volatile element to hold on to. So that obviously brings with it a whole bunch of safety things. Would you mind talking a bit
Yes,
about like what goes
yes.
into the safety on a heavy duty vehicle for people who
Yeah, so that's for me what makes the space very exciting and interesting to work in is that it's very innovative on the one hand, but on the other hand, you can't be so innovative that you create a Hindenburg every day
yeah.
and kind of fuel people. So safety is very important, and I think there's two parts. So I mentioned standardization in terms of that, you get the nozzle receptacle, and standardization also plays a big part in safety that every time there is a failure in terms of something blowing up or burning, that becomes a learning process that now goes back into the standardization. So yeah, unfortunately from hydrogen, there's actually a lot of standards are being brought over from petroleum and the kind of the gas, kind of the natural gas management. So there's been a lot of failures in that, which is now led back into the standards. Which anyone can see the standards and kind of learn from other people's mistakes. So where was I going with this? Basically, yeah, it's important. Basically, good engineering practice is very important. And it's important to, before kind of reinventing the wheel, to look at the mistakes that other people have made, both in the petrol world and in the hydrogen world, which is kind of summarized in these standards. Such as the ISO standards, and it's very important to apply them. So ISO standards are weird. So is it law? Is it not law? So a lot of the time it's not law yet, but I think it's important for a lot of the players in the hydrogen industry to kind of go ahead, and even though it's not legally enforced, to apply this standard or that standard, to just out of good engineering discipline to apply those standards, because that will prevent maybe only. The law is a lot late. Only in 10 years' time is a certain ISO standard made law. I think it's very good business and safety to start ahead of time and to kind of foresee what ISO standards will become law. Yeah.
Would you say, I don't know exactly if you've done this analysis, but in terms of compared to an EV, straight electric vehicle, lithium ion, obviously thermal runaway is a big concern.
Okay.
If you have to
Sure.
compare an accident between a lithium ion vehicle versus a high
Yes.
compressed hydrogen gas vehicle,
Yes.
are they comparative? Is one worse than the
Yeah.
other?
So I can go a bit into that, and sure. It's basically different challenges. So okay, just one summary and maybe one anecdote. I think where hydrogen starts getting dangerous is if you park it. So
Okay.
the problem with hydrogen, it's the lightest element. which has an advantage and a disadvantage. So if you were to take three things, a petrol vehicle, a battery vehicle, and a hydrogen vehicle, and you were to light a fire, what would be very cool with the hydrogen is that the fire kind of goes up. So the car itself might not burn up, but you would have this fire above the car, so which
That's
is
lekker.
kind of interesting.
I
Whereas
like that.
whereas that's oversimplifying it, but whereas the battery and the petrol kind of it's heavier and it stays there, so kind of the whole thing gets engulfed. This doesn't mean you get away with it. So the disadvantage is that hydrogen, you can't see it. You can see a flame, but you can't see hydrogen. So you need to have a lot of sensors around to kind of detect and sniff out and smell whether the hydrogen exists. And yeah, you don't really want to park. So this is a big thing that we looked at. So hydrogen first started looking at cars, and now it's more going towards aeroplanes and trucks, because that's generally outside and not parked under a roof. So if you have a hydrogen car and it's leaking very slowly, but you've left your car there for 2 weeks and then you go take a smoke, that's dangerous. Yeah. So yeah, it's very important to not park hydrogen, and I don't know at what maturity vehicles are, whether you can leave it parked for multiple weeks. Because that is a big challenge. It will go to the roof and then kind of stay there and start forming a layer going down. Yeah. So in summary, hydrogen is dangerous. It has many challenges, but the one advantage it has is that the flame goes upwards, which is good if you're in an open region and not good if you're in a closed environment. Yeah, that's in summary the safety aspects. Yeah.
Fair enough. All right, well, that's all the questions I had. Did you have anything else, Mr. Insula?
I can kind of remember my previous question, but I don't think it's super relevant now. I think it's already kind of been answered in the discussion.
In all the things. All right, Matty, is there anything else specifically you wanted to talk about, or are you happy with how it's
I think in general, you might ask it in a different question, but I think in general with a lot of things, it's important to reason from first principles, as Elon Musk says, and not to kind of reason by analogy. And why I say that is that the human being likes to have polarizing opinions. So there's two opinions out there in the media, that hydrogen sucks, it's the worst thing ever, and hydrogen is great, it's a magic bullet that's going to save all our problems and allow Earth to continue forever. Both are completely unequivocally false. So it's kind of somewhere, it's somewhere in between, and it's very nuanced. And yeah, I think it's important to kind of try and do, if you want to have an opinion on something, to have an informed opinion and understand that different things are applied to different applications, better and worse. And it's not this one that hydrogen will be the greatest thing for everything or the worst thing for everything. It's kind of somewhere in between.
Okay. I think I said to Jonathan when we had our first episode, which was about just hydrogen, full stop. We asked the question, like, is hydrogen the silver bullet? And I think we came to the consensus that it's not going to be the thing that fixes everything, but it's definitely going to be a part of the whole. Of all the, yes. So obviously solar will have its place. I think nuclear also, I don't know, I've been thinking about nuclear a lot lately. Yes. I think that's interesting. I think it's going to be part. I think what makes hydrogen attractive is that it's a form of storing it, whereas in like with solar and wind, it's generation. But if you don't use that energy and if you don't put that energy somewhere, then it's gone. And then obviously batteries versus storing hydrogen.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, there will need to be some other system level optimization where basically you have excess. So are you applying a band-aid solution to a solution? So first of all, we said you must use renewable because it's green, and we're like, oh, but renewable kind of you can't store it. So now do we use hydrogen to store that? Is that good or bad? I don't know, but it seems kind of it will be a mix of all of these together.
Yeah. All right, cool. So yeah, Matt. Shit, I always do this. So yeah, Matthew, I think let's just learn more about you. So what made you choose to be an engineer?
Yeah, I guess it's a fairly typical story, or not. When I was 10 years old, my friends talked about cars, and I didn't know what talking about. And to not be left behind, I went and bought a car magazine, and then eventually subscribed to car magazine and read everything there was about it. And then I asked, so who designs these cars? And then someone explained to me, well, you get a mechanic that fixes cars and a mechanical engineer that designs cars. So I was like, okay, cool. I want to study mechanical engineering. So yeah. And then nothing could really change my mind since then. Yeah.
It's good to know what you want to do from the get-go. I wanted to be a vet, and then I wanted to be this. I think the thing that made me decide to be an engineer is I was at a friend's house and we were watching Discovery Channel, and it was like a team of computer scientists, engineers, all of that stuff. And then the challenge was make an automatic pancake flipping machine. And I thought this was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my whole life. And then I was like, okay, well, who are these guys? And then it popped up to an image of a guy, and at the bottom it said, like, I don't know what his name was. Let's just call him Dan, mechanical engineer. And like it could have been like belly dancer there. That's what I chose to be, to study. Yeah.
That's
Anyway.
very methodical
Okay,
of you, Mr.
Oh,
Unselar.
that's cool.
Yeah. And then next question is, if you could go back to the start of your career, what would you change, if anything at all?
What advice? Yeah, I thought a lot about this. I think three things. Two are very generic, but I'll repeat them. And one is kind of my thought. So and I think they're in level of importance. So first of all, soft skills is very important. It gets said a lot, it's cliched, but it is very true. Technical competence can only get you that far. And maybe an example of that. So if you're in a meeting and you're discussing a topic, often the discussion is meant to be technical, but it can get very emotional and heated. And I think to be able to realize that look, the important thing here is that actually we want to work together again tomorrow is more important than winning an argument. That is very important to realize, and a lot of people don't realize that, including myself. So that's an example of where soft skills is very important, because working together is way more important than some other technical deliverable. Secondly, yeah, I said this earlier, reasoning from first principles. So a lot of life and a lot of also engineering is very abstracted. So if you design a car, you probably will not be an expert on tire chemistries, as an example. But it might be important to actually know a bit about that, especially if it's the first time that cars are being developed, or it's the first time that now tires are using plastic rubber instead of tree rubber. It might be important to know a little bit, even if it is just enough to ask smart questions to the scientist that is spending all day experimenting with different tire chemistries. So at some point in time, you want to be able to reason from first principles. And last one, I think it's important to find not just a company you want to work, but a city you want to work. So for me, I realized that definitely is Munich. So even if I lose my job at one company, there's a lot of other companies involved in electric vehicles. Another example, if you're into IT, back in the day, that would be Silicon Valley. So different examples. I think it's very important to find a city, wherever in the world or in the country that is, where you believe you would fit in best with your career, and not to just tie to one company, because your job security is reducing as we're going forward. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I feel like the answers to those questions are also good answers to the next question, which would be, what's your advice for young engineers?
I think you did that all
Is there
together.
anything you want to mention?
I thought it was
Yeah.
I thought it was the same. I thought
Yeah,
it was the same
it's the
question.
same thing.
Yeah.
Matt, you're a consultant now, am I correct? Is it private or for a company?
No, I basically I took a break to upskill and do a bit of consulting on the side to help me learn. But I'm kind of joining the workforce next month again.
Is it?
Yeah.
Tell us about the
Yeah.
break. What was the idea?
Yeah, good point. So a lot of my work is actually very IT based. So a lot of it is actually developing software or developing mathematical models of these hydrogen systems. The idea being you can iterate and design faster on a computer than in real world. And I realized, I basically used different tools and kind of realized that there were certain programming languages that would really benefit me if I were to learn them. So I decided to take a break and spend some time learning that. And if all goes according to plan, I'll be basically working at a company that uses this programming language to develop the software. So I realized I'm more interested in developing the tools to develop the products than developing the products themselves. It was just, I guess, a bit of introspection, realizing where I like to find myself in the value chain, and what skills do I need to kind of place myself there.
Okay. And are you going to stay in Cape Town, or are you going back to?
Going back to Munich.
Is it? Wait, next month?
Yeah. Well, it takes a while to get the visa and all that, but we'll be starting the application soon. Yeah, about 80% sure the thing hasn't been finalized, but yeah, pretty sure, about 80% sure we'll be going back to Munich. Yeah.
Man, exciting,
Yeah.
exciting.
It sounds to me like you're very much a process orientated guy than a goals one. You're more concerned about how do we do this in the best way.
Yeah,
Then
that is a very good.
how do I get the best result?
That is actually an excellent sure, and this is something I realized. One of the later questions I read basic. Maybe I'll go into that. Yeah, I read a series of books, The Innovator's Dilemma, etc., by Christensen, and he talks about three different innovators: a process innovator, a product innovator, and something else. Anyway, different types of innovators. And I've realized I spend a lot of my life developing new products, but then you go to another company and you do the exact same thing, but for a different company. And then I realize, wait, isn't it just better to rather outsource some of these processes and optimize that instead of everyone doing the same thing over and over? So yeah, I've realized in my career there's a lot of things being done over in the name of confidentiality, etc., which is not best for society. Yeah, and a big important for me is to move society forward. Yeah.
Cool. All right, Mr. Inselaar, anything else? You happy?
Yeah, no, I'm happy.
All right, sweet. Am I still breaking up to you guys?
No.
No, it just magically got better.
Fucking magic, right? All right. All right. Thank you, Matt. That was a really good good segment. I really enjoyed the conversation. And Matt has agreed, good or bad, to join us for the next sections, guys. So let's see what comes of it. First is permission to bitch. Mr. Hunselaar, I'll let you go up first.
Okay, so I don't know if you know anything at all about me, Matt, but one thing you should know about me is that I'm a musician as well.
Okay,
so
cool.
I play in a band and I sing and I'll do all that stuff. So I have a little tuner that I have for my bass and my guitars and whatever. And quite recently, like not even 3 weeks ago, I bought brand new batteries for my tuner. And then like 2 weeks later, the battery was dead. And I don't know if I left my tuner on. Sure, much. Sorry, my cats are deciding to have a mauling like fight club, right?
WWE, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and then so just bought a brand new battery, and now the battery is flat. And now my tuner has a feature on it where after 10 minutes it will turn itself off to save the battery. So I was not very impressed about that. And then I had to go and buy a new battery. And then I never know what to do with old batteries. Like I see now at Leroy and Merlin, there's a place where
there's a little place
put batteries there. So I'm gonna start doing that. But
come on, man, think about the planet.
It was really just a bitch because now I had just solved this issue and now I must go and solve it again.
And how expensive are batteries? May fuck. Yes, see.
No, how expensive is it to throw them away and buy new batteries? And
yeah, no, fair enough. And the inconvenience. Yeah.
And the amount of mental energy spent on, yeah.
Matt, you're up next. What are you bitching about this week?
Yeah, so I guess a personal side of me, I have a son that's about 1.5 years. And basically you would see a lot of cars that have this baby on board sign. And I wondered, why do you have that? And it turns out that, how do I put it? That basically you need to have a sign to say, look, there's a baby here. Please don't be such an asshole. So myself and my wife decided unequivocally that we're not going to get a baby on board sign because we do not want to admit that as a society, we need a big bloody sign to tell us
people are assholes.
Yeah. You shouldn't have to tell people to not be a dick.
Yeah, you shouldn't have a big sign to tell people, look, you're going to kill a baby and not a human. Like, do we really need to think, oh, I'm going to kill a baby? Killing adults is fine? I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me.
So I feel so terrible for laughing, but it's so real, man. Gee whiskers. Whew. So did you get the sign yet? Did you get the sign yet?
No, we're not. No, we decided not to because
you're taking a moral stand here.
Yeah, I'm taking a moral stand here. I don't need to give you full context for you to not be an arsehole.
I love it, man. You have hope for humanity. Great, great stuff. So my electricity woes continue. And this was even, I had this in before even tonight happened. Yes, see, I think
This is the third week he's talking about his electricity
I
problems.
think I think there's a problem with me, genuinely. I don't know what's going on. So we'll skip the other electricity woe I had in between this to tonight's woe. Fuck, this lady phones me now. She's one of the tenants as well in a different area now. Now she doesn't have electricity. Now, obviously, I'm prepared for this. Go there, multimeter in hand, alles, my bro. Go there. Now I can't figure out. There's no electricity from the grid. Now I have to talk to Ekruleni again. She's been phoning me this whole podcast episode, and I don't know what to tell her. Anyway, there's the bitching out. I don't know what else to say about it. I'm just cursed. It seems that I'm cursed. All right, life hacks. Let's get away from my negativity. Please, Mr. Hunselaar, tell me what your life hack is. You are muted.
Okay, so
It was a good try, man.
My first life hack is my life hack is called habit prompting.
Yes.
So obviously I went through a stage where I thought to myself, okay, how do I start building better habits and whatever? So the idea behind habit prompting is you need to set something up to remind yourself to do something. So for instance, the example they gave that when I looked this up was they said, okay, you want to have cold water, like refrigerated water, so that you can have it the next day and whatever. But you like going for runs, and then at the end of your run, you like drinking water. So before your run, put your bottle somewhere before easy to find, basically. That's gonna be in your way. And then when you come home and you're done with your run, you're gonna immediately grab that bottle, and then it prompts you to do the thing you should be doing.
Yeah.
So like that. And they say that if you want to form a habit, it needs to be easy to do.
Yeah.
So like very low effort. What's the other one?
Well, this is Atomic Habits, is it? Have you read Atomic Habits?
Yeah, I have.
Have you?
So well, I haven't read it, but I've watched a video.
You've watched a video,
which I feel like is the same thing. You get the same point. You just don't get as much detail about
it. Is that the thing?
Anyway, so yeah. So
well, his whole
easy
thing,
to do. There must be a low to do it.
There was there's three things. I'll Google it as well. I remember the analogy you used was if you want to go to gym more, go to gym for 5 minutes, just walk in, get a towel, walk out, or whatever the story is. Then the next day you go for a bit longer, and that type of thing. But yeah, sorry, I interrupted you there. Continue your.
Yeah, well, that's basically it. Habit prompting. So if you wanna do something for yourself, just figure out an easy way to get yourself to start, and then eventually it will build up.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and you Matt? Mr. Delport.
Now let's let Matt go. I like to go last.
Okay, fine.
I think that's a very good one, and I'll add on to that. And I think it's, maybe 10, 20 years ago, the advice would be, write down what you want to do. But now we have trillions of millions of to-do lists for every aspect of our life, and that's not enough anymore. So you need to do something physical in your reality, such as, tripping over your shoes when you come home, as a example, like Damon said. So I think it's important for me, the mind shift I had to make on this atomic habits idea is like writing stuff down is not enough. You need to, like, I don't know, for me, I really like cycling. So I need to set up my bicycle before the time. If I come home from work, I'm going to be too tired to pump the wheels or something like that. You need to do that before the time. Writing down, go cycle. It's not going to help. Yeah.
For me, it's like if I get home in the evenings and I don't have like my protein shake made, Yeti, I'll go for every fucking thing in the kitchen, mate. There's Fanta orange going down. There's rusks. There's everything except good food. And I just need to make it in the morning. All right, Mr. Hunselaar, I've got it here. It's the 4 laws of behavior change. The first one is make it obvious. The second one is make it attractive. Third one is make it easy. And the fourth is make it satisfying. Does that sound familiar to you?
Not actually. That wasn't the 3 things as.
No, man, come on. That's literally from his book.
Yeah, man, I found it. It's reminder, routine, reward. That's
Oh, is this something different? Man, I
What
thought I was
Damon went
revolutionizing
a
the life.
step further and took the same underlying principles and made it his own,
Ah,
which
look
is
at
even.
that. I like it. All right. From me, the only thing was I just came across this accidentally. I can use my little 360 camera as a webcam. Man, I was looking actually the whole week, like to buy different webcams and stuff, but the reviews are all like terrible. And then I just found my one and it just all worked out. So my life's not completely horrible. I'll tell you that much. So for anyone who has an Insta360, you can use it as a webcam if you didn't know, for those 6 people listening. All right. Are we going to do memes, Mr. Insula? We're running long here, mate.
Yeah, I think maybe let's skip it.
You want to skip memes? All right, sweet.
Yeah.
Let's go straight to recommendations then. Matt, you already did. Do you want to chat anything more about your recommendation? It's a book series, am I right?
Yeah, I think yeah. So the innovators dilemma. I think it was recommendations around content or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
So basically, I've read a lot of books, a lot of self-help books. There's a lot of great books out there. No, what I'm saying, there's a lot of recommendations for book out there, but I think what I found the most practical out of, all the bestsellers out there is definitely Clayton Christensen's Innovators, and there's 3 of them: Dilemma, Solution, DNA, or whatever. And that's, yeah, specifically in my job role. And I think a lot of people find this, if you're any sort of like product development, so whether that be engineering, IT, or whatever it is, kind of understanding how innovation works, and that is it the big company that's going to win, or the startup, or combination thereof? He goes a lot into this with research that is done into these types of questions, and I find that kind of gives a very good overall picture to find, like, me doing engineering calculations, where does that fit in the innovation spectrum? Innovation gets used a lot, but what does that mean? What does that mean to me? And that book kind of answers that. Yeah.
You're not actually the first person who's told me actually to read this series. I've heard some very good things about it. Should actually add it to the reading list that I never get to. Mr. Hunselaar, what's your recommendations?
Oh, well, I suppose the only thing, last time it was Lord of the Rings, and then I finished that. So
Right.
now it's The Hobbit.
It's The Hobbit. Very nice.
It's just, it's all making sense to me now.
Are you going to watch the series? I know I asked this last time. Have you even looked at the series?
See, I always like, to me, watching a series is also a big investment
A big
of my time.
Man, there's like 10 episodes, man. I think. I don't know. They spent $1 billion on it. Come on.
Okay, well, since they spend so much money, then I'll give my measly 10
Bezos needs
hours.
your views, man. Bezos needs your views. All right, from me. So I don't know if you guys are well, Matt, if you Star Wars fans, Mr. Hunselaar is still uneducated on it, but he'll get there. The Acolyte. Been watching it. We had episode 5 now. I don't know how many there are, 12 or whatever the story is. Actually really enjoying it. I must say, I don't know if I said this last week. It slipped my mind, obviously, but really enjoying it. It's a nice, we obviously discussed this the other day in the office, but it's nice to not have the story around Luke, Leia, and flippin' Han Solo. Like, it's before their time. It's before Yoda's time. There's still green people, but it's before Yoda's time and stuff. It's really cool. I'm really enjoying it. Would recommend. 10 out of 10. Lekker. All right, sweet, guys. That's all from me. You guys got any last words here? Not at the moment.
I guess that's a no.
That's a no from everyone.
Me.
All right,
Yeah,
guys.
I think it's great to always to actually, it's really great to have people like yourselves that are not experts to kind of ask the basic sounding questions to get experts to kind of go out of their,
Comfort zone.
what do you call it, birdcage or echo chamber. So
Yeah.
so that's really good. Yeah.
No, man, we try.
Thanks for having the discussion with us. Obviously, like, you gave up like an hour of your time or so to have a chat with us, and we really appreciate it.
But to look at our good looking faces, man. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on, man. He enjoys
I'm
our
wearing
company.
I'm wearing my nice hat for you.
I can see you got all dressed up for this.
Yeah.
All right, guys, thank you so much for listening to the end of the episode. As always, if you want to get into contact with us, you can send us an email. It's highlevelpodcasts. That's with a podcasts with an S at gmail.com. If you want to follow us, subscribe to us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. We're there. The tag, the @ will be at High Level Podcasts. feel free, reach out to us, send us memes, send us messages. And if you're listening on a podcast platform, please hit subscribe, please, guys, so you never miss an episode from our sexy beards here. Matt's the only one without a beard this week. I think we're going to change his mind on that. Maddie, is there anywhere that people can get a hold of you if you want? What's your preferred platform?
Yeah, if you can just give my name. So on, I guess LinkedIn is the
LinkedIn,
best.
easiest for you.
Just reach out to me there. Matthew, Matthew, and then my surname Kapp. Please send me an invite, send me a message there on, connect with
Perfect.
me and send a message.
Perfect, guys. When you send him the connection request, just say, "We heard you on the High Level podcast." Then he'll immediately say yes. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Reach out to Matt, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.